Over the weekend, the nation's op-ed pages decided to remind us all why President Trump is president. Not because he's so great at everything, not because the president is playing MAGA chess, but because the left has decided to go fully crazy. And there's several op-eds in a row that we're going to go through here talking about the outskirts of the left, but these are printed in mainstream newspapers. Okay, this is not stuff from The Nation. This is not stuff even from Salon or Slate. This is stuff from the New York Times and the Washington Post and the Atlantic. All of these are mainstream outlets on the left, and none of them are particularly good. I don't know what was in the water over the weekend, or whether they just feel so emboldened on the left that they feel like they can say anything and get away with it. But whatever it is not going to be good for their agenda. Here's the first example. Ruth Marcus, who's the deputy editorial page editor, right? So she has a high position over at the Washington Post, wrote an opinion piece called, quote, "I would have aborted a fetus with Down syndrome. Women need that right." Okay, this is just a piece in favor of eugenics. If the idea is that you get to abort a baby because the baby has Down syndrome, then what is the difference between aborting a baby with Down syndrome, not because you don't think it's a baby, but because it has Down syndrome, and doing that with somebody who is actually already born? Here's what Ruth Marcus writes. There's a new push in anti-abortion circles to pass state laws aimed at barring women from terminating their pregnancy after the fetus has been determined to have Down syndrome. These laws are unconstitutional, unenforceable, and wrong. This is a difficult subject to discuss because there's so many parents who have and cherish a child with Down syndrome. Many people with Down syndrome live happy and fulfilled lives. The new Gerber baby with Down syndrome is awfully cute. I've had 2 children. I was old enough when I became pregnant that it made sense to do the testing for Down syndrome. Back then, it was amniocentesis performed after 15 weeks. Now, chorionic villus sampling can provide a conclusive determination as early as 9 weeks. I can say without hesitation that tragic as it would have been and ghastly as that second trimester abortion would have been, I would have terminated those pregnancies had the testing come back positive. I would have grieved the loss and moved on. Well, good for you, Ruth, that you would have grieved the loss. First of all, it's always a bizarre point in abortion fanatics lingo that they'll say things like, I would have grieved the loss. The loss of what? If it's not morally wrong, then what are you grieving? If it's just a cluster of cells, then what exactly are you grieving? Are you grieving the lost opportunity? Like, well, what are you... Presumably, you're grieving the human that you just killed or had killed in the womb. And just because that human in the womb had Down syndrome doesn't mean that it was okay for you to do that, and you should feel morally exculpated from what you just did. Here's what she continues to say. I'm not alone. More than 2/3 of American women choose abortion in such circumstances. Isn't that the point, or at least inherent in the point, of prenatal testing in the first place? Well, no. The point of prenatal testing in the first place is generally to see if there is some sort of condition that can be fixed as the pregnancy continues. So, for example, if there had been the capacity to actually look at my first child's heart and see that there was a hole in her heart when she was developing, they might have been able to do something prenatally. I don't know how the surgery works, but there are all sorts of surgeries that they do on children before they are born, where they actually perform, it's an amazing thing. They perform surgeries on children who are still in the womb, and they sew up the womb, and the pregnancy continues, and the kid is just fine. This sort of thing happens all the time. The point of prenatal testing is not kill the child if things come out wrong. That's called eugenics, folks, okay? And it's a bad thing. This is what they have in Iceland. Down syndrome people are not there, and they just don't exist in Iceland because they're all killed in the womb. That is not a good thing for the inherent value of human life. When you say the inherent value of human life degrades if you are born with low IQ thanks to genetic conditions. If you believe that abortion is equivalent to murder, the taking of a human life, then of course you would have made a different choice. But that is not my belief, and the Supreme Court has affirmed my freedom to have that belief and act accordingly. Well, you can always have that belief. I mean, you have the freedom to have that belief, but the Supreme Court is not a moral arbiter. This is one of the things that drives pro-life people absolutely insane. When people look at pro-choice people, and pro-choice people point to the Supreme Court, they point to like Justice Blackmun. They say, well, Justice Blackmun says it's okay. My answer to that is, who the hell's Justice Blackmun? Why would I care about that? Like, Ruth Bader Ginsburg says something is okay. Ooh, now you've spooked me. Wow, you've totally changed my opinion now. I guess it wasn't a human life because Justice Roberts said something, or because Justice Kennedy said something. It's so dumb. And finally, I mean, it's an argument from authority. The same people who say you can't cite the Bible in defense of human life will say you can cite Ruth Bader Ginsburg in defense of the right to kill a human life. Pretty amazing stuff. Ruth Marcus says, I admire families that knowingly welcome a baby with Down syndrome into their lives. Again, the sentiments here are conflicting. Why do you respect and admire those people? Presumably, you think those people made a horrible mistake. Presumably, you think that those people are idiots who think that this was a human life. It wasn't a human life. And now they've brought a child into the world, and that child is presumably suffering because of the Down syndrome. So presumably they're bad people for bringing the child into the world. Like, this is not there's not a lot of gray area here. She says, certainly to be a parent is to take the risks that accompany parenting. You love your child for who she is, not what you want her to be. But accepting that essential truth is different from compelling a woman to give birth to a child whose intellectual capacity will be impaired, whose life choices will be limited, whose health may be compromised. Okay, let me read that sentence again. Okay, very slowly for those who missed it. That's an insane sentence. Okay, fully crazy. That is a morally That is a morally ignominious statement. Accepting that essential truth is different from compelling a woman to give birth to a child whose intellectual capacity will be impaired. Okay, every single person in the United States has an impaired intellectual capacity to one extent or another. Everyone is not born Einstein. Okay, there's a very small group of people who are born with genius-level IQ. Everybody else does not have as much of a chance in life. Does that mean abortion is okay? I mean, this is pure eugenics right here, whose life choices will be limited. Okay, every single human has life choices that are limited. Every single human. Okay, what you're looking for when you're talking about morality is a limiting principle. You're looking for something that distinguishes cases. This, as we say in law school, would be an argument that proves too much. It suggests that every human being should be aborted based on certain circumstances, whose life choices will be limited. Okay, Beethoven was born into a family where his dad used to beat him in the middle of the night if he didn't practice piano correctly. Was that a limited life choice? Sure. He went deaf later in life, actually not even that late. When he was in his late 20s, he started to go deaf. Was that a limited life choice? Sure. Right? Whose health may be compromised. Every single person will die. Every person who's been born will die, and everyone will have a health problem before then. It says most children with Down syndrome have mild to moderate cognitive impairment, meaning an IQ between 55 and 70, mild, or between 35 and 55, moderate. This means limited capacity for independent living and financial security. Down syndrome is life-altering for the entire family. Now, there's no question that that is true. But that is also true when you have a parent who's slipping into senility. Do we get to stab them in the chest? Do we farm them off to the Soylent Green factory? When people get Alzheimer's, what are we supposed to do with them? Is the idea that the good thing for the family would be just to pull the plug? There are tons of people whose capacity for independent living is limited and who live wonderful lives. And not only that, sometimes it makes you a better person as a human. I mean, we're talking about the impact on the mother here. Sometimes it makes us as human beings better that we have to make certain sacrifices in favor of others. When I was growing up, my dad had a pretty debilitating back condition. It meant that everybody in the family had to carry all heavy objects around the house, right? Like my dad just couldn't carry, it wasn't a thing. And we just grew up knowing that was something that we had to do. Now, obviously, that's very mild compared to what we're talking about here. But the point is this. Love is about the sacrifices that you make for the people that you love. And when it comes to people with Down syndrome, are they not deserving of love in the same way that anybody else would be? Ruth Marcus says, I'm going to be blunt here. This was not the child I wanted. That was not the choice I would have made. You may call me selfish or worse, but I'm in good company. Well, no, you're in bad company, actually, and you are selfish or worse. She says, the evidence is clear that most women confronted with the same unhappy alternative would make the same decision. Again, a horrifying argument. Lots of people make horrible decisions throughout the course of human history. In Nazi Germany, tons of people were making terrible decisions all the time, and they would say, the majority is with me. Guess what? The majority in the South was with segregation and slavery. Did that mean segregation and slavery were okay? Of course not. That's not even an argument. That's an emotional appeal. Well, don't talk about me like I'm special. I'm not special. Everybody else is bad, too. This crap doesn't work with my kindergartner, my pre-kindergartner. It shouldn't work with a fully grown woman. She says, which brings us to the Supreme Court. North Dakota, Ohio, Indiana, and Louisiana passed legislation to prohibit doctors from performing abortions if the sole reason is because of a diagnosis of Down syndrome. Utah's legislature is debating such a bill. These laws are flatly inconsistent with the Supreme Court's Roe v. Wade ruling, reaffirmed in 1992, that, quote, it is a constitutional liberty of the woman to have some freedom to terminate her pregnancy. Well, not really. She puts the focus on the phrase of the woman. But the focus should be on some freedom. Even if you're a believer in Roe v. Wade, there is some freedom, but that freedom does not extend to everything. He says, as U.S. District Judge Tanya Walton Pratt concluded in striking down the Indiana law, the state's high court determination leaves no room for the state to examine, let alone prohibit, the basis or bases upon which a woman makes her choice. So for any reason, abortion on demand. Just think about it. Can it be that women have more constitutional freedom to choose to terminate their pregnancies on a whim than for the reason that the fetus has Down syndrome? Now, this is her only good argument, and it proves the reverse of what she wants it to prove. She's saying, well, why would we limit the capacity of women to choose on Down syndrome, but we wouldn't limit their capacity to choose to abort a fetus just for fun? I agree. Okay, the fact is that when you are talking about killing a baby in the womb, your choice should be severely circumscribed, whether you're talking about Down syndrome or anything else. And she says, to the question of enforceability, who's going to police the decision-making? Doctors are now supposed to turn in their patients for making a decision of which the state disapproves. No, my guess is that all of these bills do not punish the woman. They probably punish the doctor. They say, in an argument worthy, this is Ruth Marcus, in an argument worthy of The Handmaid's Tale, the state of Indiana suggests precisely that scenario. The right to abortion, its lawyer argued before a federal appeals court last month, protects only the binary decision of whether to bear a child, not which child you must carry to term once you choose to become pregnant. In other words, though you didn't put it in these exact words, the state can hijack your body. It's not about hijacking the body of the woman. This is about protecting the body of the baby inside the woman. Duh. Okay, so this is just example number one of the extremism of the left brought into